Hey everyone, it's Erin from Lady Bee Collective, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Okay, I don't think there's gonna be any distractions, which I don't even know what to do. I mean, I guess maybe some dog distractions, but let's get right to it. I think today I want to talk about disappointment. For me, that just includes people disappointing me, disappointing myself, the cycle of when I disappoint myself, and then somebody else disappoints me, and then I end up kind of getting in that victim mentality and not wanting to show up for myself. And that's kind of what I want to say, and just the concept of disappointment, because we're human, this is life, and it happens. And it happens in a lot of areas. And so I think I just want to kind of generally go over it and then talk about disappointing ourselves, I guess. So in general, I'd say we mostly talk about how others disappoint us. And obviously that's true, and it hurts. And I could sit here and say there's so many lessons that happen when disappointment happens, because if you allow that in, after the hurt, you do learn the lessons and you grow, but it doesn't feel good at all. And sometimes we keep allowing people to disappoint us because, one, we don't feel like we're worth it. Two, it's almost easier. If people disappoint us, then that's on them, and we could keep blaming them or blaming situations where they disappoint us, and that could keep us just not focused on ourselves and not having to do anything if you blame others, if we don't end up taking responsibility. And that was a hard pill for me to swallow, because when disappointment would come in, and it seemed like it would come in a lot at different times, and maybe it wasn't me per se doing that. Disclaimer, we all disappoint people as well. But back to the point of, even if it wasn't me, I was still allowing it. And I think a part of me, like I said, was addicted to that chaos of somebody else disappointed me. Now I'm gonna feel bad about myself. I'm gonna put that negative energy out there. And again, not saying that it's ever somebody's fault that somebody's disappointing us, but we get stuck in that suffering cycle that I talk a lot about. And that's the thing that people don't always want to talk about, because we get in these patterns, and then people will say, like, reach out for help. But the people that we can only go to sometimes for help can keep us in that suffering cycle, right? Because we're already down on ourselves. Maybe we don't have that support. Or even worse, I hate to say this, I love therapy, I love therapists, but sometimes they don't focus as much on the wellness aspect. It's the suffering aspect. We have to relive and recount our trauma and the disappointments, right? Starting from childhood and going forward. And yes, it's very important to get it out. But if you ever felt like you got it out so much that now it's almost re-traumatizing, right? So there's all these areas that are helpful, but they still keep us in this suffering kind of cycle that leads and kind of coexists with disappointment. And it seems like the more we get hit hard with disappointments, and sometimes we can't help them, right? That's a part of life. So how do we deal with this? How do we deal with disappointment from others? And even more importantly, what I want to really focus on is disappointing ourselves. Because the only one we really can control, and we all know this, but it's the hardest thing to do, is our own actions, right? And sometimes, at least for a really long time with me, it's like, well, if I don't disappoint myself and I take really good care of myself and I have no one to share that with, right? Or I'm not surrounded by the right support, or I don't have a relationship or a healthy one, then what's the point, right? Isn't it easier to just sit and be like, whatever, I'll take care of myself when I find a good person, when I'm happier, when I find more purpose, whatever the excuse is. But the thing is one, I learned in the meantime, when we're not helping ourselves, that's what we're putting out there. We're not gonna find those opportunities and those blessings and those people when we're sitting in misery. And two, when we find it, sorry for my language, but how are we gonna keep it if we haven't been working on ourselves? We're gonna take two people or two experiences or whatever it is And if we're not actively daily working on stuff, even if it's small little things, then we're going to get this opportunity and be completely overwhelmed, because good or bad, it's overwhelming, and we're not going to be ready. And that was the hardest pill for me to swallow, was that doing all this work alone and not having the support, and like trying to be all excited about like, yay, I'm finding myself, and self-love and self-acceptance and blah blah blah. Like, yes, those are all good catchwords, and yes, those are all important, but the reality is when you start doing that, you sometimes just, well, one, you disappoint yourself, sometimes by not showing up, or you disappoint others, because you're not going to show up for some people anymore, right? Things have to change. So all of this comes with this disappointment in ourselves from so many angles, right? And so it would switch from disappointing myself to then having enough boundaries to not disappoint myself but disappoint others, and then life would happen and that would disappoint me, and then I would think about why would people do that, and it would get stuck in my head, and that doesn't help anxiety. And it's just this big cycle that so many of us get caught up in, especially if you have depression, anxiety, if you're an empath, if you're a caring person. The disappointment really hits hard. Some people, they can get disappointment, they deal with it and move past it. Others, like myself, we really cling to it. And I started to just cling to so many disappointments, that myself included, what I've done to people, what people have done to me, what I've done to myself, it just started to build and build. And I still have some of it. And with disappointment comes resentment and loss of confidence and anxiety and all of these things. And I just don't think, again, we talk about disappointment as much because we don't want to. It's embarrassing. It doesn't feel good to be vulnerable and see that people disappoint us, and even more so that we disappoint ourselves all the time, even if it's little ways. And so I just thought that as it's building, like, how do I slowly get rid of each layer of healing from these disappointments? And so for me, again, you know me, I always talk about this journal, and I like writing down just what I'm feeling, who disappointed me, and that's the hard part too, is that people are going to disappoint you, and a lot of times that's a reflection of them, not you. It pushes onto you. So I started seeing it from a different outside perspective of, is that on that person? Was it malicious? Did they mean to do it? Is it repetitive? Or did it happen one time? Those are very important. If it wasn't malicious, if it happened one time, if it's a reflection of them and they have insight, then that's part of life, and that's something that I could learn to let go of. But if it's repetitive, if it's always placed on me, if I'm always feeling their disappointment and taking it on to myself and then disappointing myself, that's got to go. And right there, it removed a lot of people and made room for better people in there. It removed a lot of experiences. Just asking myself those always in anything that you go through. Is it repetitive? What are intentions? And what is someone's insight? And I think that goes to us too. What's our insight, right? Because it's hard to know if we have insight, because we think that we do, right? Or we think that we're right, or we make an excuse for if we're not wrong, and we see it from our perspective. So those things right there really helped me when I would deal with disappointment from others. The hardest part was dealing with those same things when I disappointed myself. So many times I knew better, and so many times I just didn't show up for myself, and that's okay, because healing isn't linear, and that was part of my nervous system and my habits, wanting to not show up for myself. It's easier to play victim. It's easier to disappoint yourself sometimes, because then you could just be upset a little bit, cry about it, and move on. That's what I thought. But it really sticks with you, and it really does affect your self-esteem. It really does affect you being the best you. It does affect everything around you. I used to ask myself why certain things weren't happening for me. And it wasn't that I was comparing myself necessarily to others, but I just had my own goals, and that I really tried for and I didn't understand. And along with timing and when you're ready, I realized that I was disappointing myself more than I thought. I was not showing up always consistently. And I was saying that I was putting forth my best effort because I was putting in so much effort. But I wasn't really. And I wasn't learning to pivot when things didn't work. You know how they say if you keep doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same results, something to that extent. I always say that I'm gonna say these sayings and then I don't remember properly, but that's the definition of insanity, and that's what I would do. So I would still put in the work, but it was just busy work. It wasn't hard work. Whether it be in projects or myself, I literally just kept going with it, hoping it would change. And there's a certain point where, you have to put out consistent work in yourself, in others, in whatever you do. But there's a point where if it's not working, you have to pivot to help make it work. And those little changes, I wasn't pivoting to get what I wanted and what I needed. And then I started to do that, right? Just a little pivot, even though it was so uncomfortable or I really had no fucking clue of what I was doing. I started making those little changes and I started being more proud of myself. And again, that's contagious, and started getting more confidence. And then with that, it sounds kind of, I don't know, a little bit weird, but no one could really get to me in that horribly disappointing way anymore, because I had put up those boundaries. I had done the work and I had the confidence. So although it hurt a little bit, I knew that I could look myself in the mirror and know that I did my best in whatever project, in whatever experience, with whatever person. And it didn't hurt as bad because, again, I put in that work and I knew that I did everything I could. And I knew that I couldn't take everything personally. And with time, the disappointments didn't stay as long and it felt good. And then when I got the confidence, I realized, again, I'm human and I've done all of these things that I feel align with my purpose that I've never done. I've done things so intentional when I used to just do things to do them, to keep busy, to not feel. And that takes so much work. And that I started being more gentle on myself, which made when I didn't show up for myself, sometimes it was okay because I had overly been showing up for myself, right? And again, I'm human, and now I was overloading it on the other way. And so just trying to find that balance. And the way that I did that, again, was asking myself about what I wanted, who was there to support, what repetitive habits was I dealing with that were toxic within other people and myself, putting a little action plan together, little simple things per day. I say this all the time, and it totally works. And it seems like they have nothing to do with each other, but it really just builds that confidence. And then you're not feeling all this disappointment, and then you're not taking everything personal. Disappointment is another foundation that I believe so many things stem from, and so many things can really be good for you by learning how to deal with it with yourself and others. And on the other hand, so many things could really explode and not allow you to really get the most out of things when we don't know how to deal with disappointment. So that's kind of just what I wanted to say today. I don't know if you can relate, but I hope so. Again, this and the podcast are a lot of just food for thought. So yeah, that's it for today. As I always say, check out ladybecollective.com. Life's been really busy, which it always has been, but just taking it up a notch the last couple months. And so I'm really trying to get more back into the groove of things. I do everything on Instagram with my stories and my posts and my podcast, and I'm going to try to do YouTube more. And like I've talked about, if you listen to my podcast, that I'm going to do a blog series on kind of how I deal with everyday life while still having trauma and healing from that, and still having anxiety, and how I just take on relationships and kids and career and dreams and family and all of that stuff. So it'll be a different topic each week. Finally, I'm getting some time where I can sit and focus on that. So I'll probably start that in the next couple days, and it'll probably be out next week. And that's it. So I hope you're having a good Wednesday. If you're not, remember that we can see a little clearer the next day. So just let those feelings go. Do what you need to do in a safe manner to get through that day. If you're having a good day, appreciate it. Be grateful for it. If it's just a mundane day, those are helpful too. We all need those mundane days in between the highs and the lows, for sure. And just, again, remember you're worth it, and you're capable, and you're enough, no matter what your feelings and emotions are telling you, or what you are feeling. And show up. You don't have to show up perfect. Show up as you are, because that's where you're most authentic, and that's where people can see more of your authenticity. So I hope that was helpful. Again, you could DM me on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram, so DM me there, or write me at info@ladybecollective.com. Check it out. It's been a little while, but just check out the different parts of the website, and that's about it. So I will talk to you next week. Bye.